First of all, thank you very much for taking the time, man. It's been nice. I've been trying to talk to different people in the last few weeks, if you like, a
Like
month.
I said, you've become the Joe Rogan of Krav Maga.
Oh, poor me. No, it's like the Joe handicapped because
Joe
I cannot go
Rogan.
I can go anywhere, man. I have to talk to people via this thing here, which is okay. At least we have been having the time to, talk about different things and, learn from a different point of view. As I said to everybody, when we are training, it's always the same story. You get in, you train people for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and then you leave, and that's it. We don't have the time to talk. And sometimes you don't understand, you don't know the whole story behind how the person got there, and different stories about life and things like that that can sometimes be a good incentive. It's something we can relate to, or something we can say, it's different from my lifestyle. But of course, you have a very interesting story, and this is what I've been doing the last few weeks, is asking people about the story. So tell us about it from the beginning, not the big explosion, but a little bit after that. You being who you are. So
Sometime after the Big Bang, you mean?
Take it away. Yes.
So I'll start my story sometime after the Big Bang happened, huh?
That's the one. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what do you want to know? How I got into Krav Maga?
No. Let's go one back. We have something before that that's way more interesting than Krav Maga.
Oh, that. Yeah. So I originally was I grew up in a part of the U.S. not very populated. Maine, the most northern state on the East Coast, up above like New York and Boston. And I played baseball and I did regular sports, but at about 15, I got interested somehow in cycling, bike racing. So I bought a bike and started riding and kept going further and further away and from where I lived, and eventually that turned into an interest in wanting to race bikes. So when I was 18, the first time I was ever on an airplane, I flew from Boston to Brussels with a phone number of a club in Brussels that maybe would have a place for me to ride for a few months. And that's how it started, 4 years going back and forth between Europe and the US, racing in Belgium and then going back to the US to work and earn money. And so what I really wanted to be was not a Krav Maga instructor. What I really wanted to do was win the Tour de France.
Wow.
But that didn't happen. So.
Well, at least you can go to the Tour de France because you live very close now. We don't have to bother in winning anymore. Wow, how
when I graduated from high school in the US, we have our yearbooks. So the senior students tell a little bit about themselves. So in my yearbook, they ask you, okay, what your name and what you want to be, and just a little bit of basic biographical information. And so I stated in my ambition that my ambition was two-part. I wanted to be living in Europe as a professional cyclist. So I got half of it.
Oh, that's it. You had to choose between A and B, and you took the blue pill or the red one. So
exactly.
Here we go. There you are.
Yeah.
So you never thought you could be living in Europe and earning money doing something else, and then also able to ride your bicycle, which is what you do most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I did. I had 1 year where I basically didn't have to worry about any money or anything. I was taken care of for 1 whole year of cycling, so that was as close as I got to being, professional at it. So.
Well, and tell me the feeling of leaving the U.S. I mean, Maine itself is the size of a country. And I'm sure if you can say, look, have you been everywhere in Maine? You probably would say no, because it's really big. But the point is moving to Europe and landing in a place where, for example, today you jump on your bicycle, you can have breakfast in Germany and then come back home again for lunch. It is something that if you have to talk about this 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you'll be laughing probably and going like, come on, this is impossible.
Yeah, and I mean, places in the U.S. like California and Colorado, they had bike riders, they had bike racers, good bike racers, but where I came from, nobody did it. Nobody knew anything about it. There were only maybe a dozen people in Maine that were like serious bike riders who knew anything about it, who had been anywhere, and people that I could talk to and, learn things about it. So, it was crazy. I mean, I can remember my family just saying, well, it's crazy to to want to go and do. Okay, so one thing you want to ride your bike around for fun or health or whatever, but it's another thing to like go someplace totally different. And and I was scared to death. I'd never been out of my hometown. I was raised in a place where like people from the city, we only have two cities in Maine, basically Portland and Augusta. The biggest one, Portland, only has maybe 100,000 people. Those were like city people. You stayed away from city people, and
They're
if
bad.
you ever encounter, if you ever encounter anyone from Boston, like the tips that they give you on surviving a bear attack, don't run, just try and stay calm. I mean, that's how I grew up. So I went to Belgium, and it was like this. Well, I mean, it was another country, but I mean, it was like another planet.
Yeah.
And I came into contact with some people who later on, were major sort of figures in cycling in the 90s, who became European professionals and things. And, I had the chance to actually get to meet those people. And of course, we had no idea then what they were going to turn out to be. But some of them were like, big heroes in Belgium eventually. And
That's the thing, people, I didn't know about Belgium being the center of all this, and France and Belgium, the Netherlands also very strong when it comes to all that. And, there are so many
small countries. Yeah, small countries, cheap to race in, races every day from like May to, September.
Wow. And you
you
guys
don't
in
have to
Holland,
travel.
and you guys in Holland have about 2 hills in the whole country, which is like makes life much easier to ride a bicycle.
Well, I've got a few hills.
That was a
around
joke.
here.
That was a joke, Dutch people. You can smile now.
None of them are laughing. So.
No, they didn't get my joke. That's okay. It's okay. I'll write it down later in the description. Okay, that's very nice. And then some of the guys you rode that became famous. Can you name a couple at least?
Sure. I mean, one was the son of one of the greatest cyclists of all time, who was Eddie Merckx, who won the Tour de France 5 times.
Wow.
Whose nickname was the Cannibal because he won hundreds of races and would just destroy people for pleasure. And his son, Axel, I actually raced with Axel, trained with Axel. But one of the biggest figures that I came into contact with was a guy named Frank van der Broeke. Van der Broeke was part of the Van der Broeke sort of cycling dynasty in Belgium. He was, I met him, he was 15, I was 18. And he was just obviously someone with an enormous amount of talent. And he was already at 15 sort of being groomed to become what he later became, which was a guy who won some big races and who was seen as one of the next big Belgian heroes of cycling. But what happens, and it's only been talked about since what happened in the 90s, late 90s with cycling, is that a lot of these guys, the pressure that gets put on them, especially Belgian riders, they turn to things which, all the doping and which comes out later on, the facts about it come out later on. And Frank was also someone who was a very vulnerable person. He was someone who was prone to depression, and he felt a lot of pressure. And he ended up doing different things. The biggest one was the EPO, the whole EPO story with cycling, boosting the red blood cells. But I mean, let's be clear, when people ask me about cycling, and always, all these guys are doing the doping, and I got to tell you something, those guys that are doing the doping, they're getting, an extra 2-3%. They are phenomenal athletes. You're taking a Ferrari and you're putting a little bit better engine in it and going up against, other Ferraris who, it's just, it's not that they take donkeys and make them into Kentucky Derby winners. They're incredible athletes.
There was that documentary about the guy that was trying to race, and
right.
then eventually says he had a whole year of treatment, and it made no difference, and he was like, "Come on, man, what's wrong with me?"
Yeah, exactly. And guys like Van der Broeke, they were capable of, if there had been no doping and everything was a level playing field, guys like Van der Broeke, Tyler Hamilton, who was also a teammate of mine, won a stage at the Tour de France. With a broken collarbone, he won the stage.
Sure.
Who was in so much pain that he ground all of his teeth down and later had to have them crowned and fixed. you know, these guys were, I had direct contact with all of them. I had quite a bit of contact with Tyler as well, because he was on my the same amateur team that I raced on. These guys were, like I said, they were winners long before anybody ever stuck a needle in them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. When it takes his, again, mindset and, you know, the will, the desire to sit on a bicycle for hours on end, for days on end, going up and down hills.
Yeah, they're incredible athletes. They are to be, you know, admired and looked upon in awe. You know, I was one of our instructors, Gideon, has also recently started riding a race bike, and I've been giving him a lot of tips and things. He just went on his second ride today, I think, and a lot of you know, tips on equipment and how to ride and things to do, things not to do, things that can happen. But
So tell him once he's ready, we're going to take him to Tenerife and show him the volcano.
Yeah, I've told him about Tenerife, right?
That horrible
so for those
place.
of you that don't know, Joe and I went and rode up the volcano on Tenerife, which was, what was it, almost 50 kilometers uphill.
Let me adjust a little bit what he just said. Both of us went there, but he was the one who managed to get to the top and to the bottom, to the top again, while I was halfway up, by the way. I nearly had a heart attack. I would die there with nobody around me, apart from the little lizards in the middle of the road. And,
Joe bought a good bottle of wine, though, halfway up the hill.
Oh, no, okay, hold on. I had to go all the way there, you know, and I couldn't come down with my empty hands. I had to buy a bottle of wine halfway, which then I took it down in my little backpack, about, what, 70 kilometers an hour downhill. It was beautiful.
Yeah, it was fast downhill, yeah.
Jesus, yeah, fast downhill is a way of explaining that, yeah. But anyway, well, okay, so then you are in Europe. Yeah, you also had a degree or something that you had to finish?
Right. So basically, between my first trip was the year that I graduated from high school, which was 1990, and basically from 90 to 94, I went back and forth between Maine and Belgium. So I would race the racing season, or at least part of it, until my money and motivation and health, you know, held out, and then I would go back and I would work and get money for the next trip. But I can remember doing the tour of, it was called the Grand Prix Francois Faber, which was basically the amateur tour of Luxembourg. Wow. And I raced it in the colors. I think I told you this before, Joe. I actually raced it in the colors of the Brazilian Olympic team.
Oh, you mentioned that before, yes.
Yeah, they were in Belgium, close to where I was living.
You see, you're more Brazilian than I am, because I never did anything from Brazil.
Yeah.
Apart from living Brazil, of course.
This was a really high level race, and the Brazilian team was living and training in Belgium, quite close to where I was, and they got hit by a car. Like the whole team just got plowed into by a car. So a couple of guys had broken arms and legs, but anyway, they had to go to, or they were scheduled to go to Grand Prix Francois Faber, and they were short 2 guys. So we got a phone call like 10 o'clock at night the day before this thing started, and said, you guys are packing up your stuff, you and whoever the other guy was, you're going to do this. And it was just brutal. I mean, it was just horrible.
I can imagine.
And I can remember looking at these guys. Some of these guys would also later on get onto professional teams. And, you know, it was obvious that what I had was not what they had. So, you know, the realization sets in that you can keep living like this. It's okay now, you're only, you know, early 20s or whatever, and but you know, this isn't going to hold out forever. So
no.
I went back to school. I eventually earned a degree. I went through the University of Maine system, and I graduated in 5 years, I think 4 years. Yeah. Wow. So I had a degree in English. Yeah.
So in English, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, with so many other things for you to choose coming from that.
The only thing I was ever good at, I couldn't do math to save my life. Someone had a gun to my head, I couldn't do it. And so like writing was the only thing that I ever really had much of a talent for, as far as schoolwork goes.
Now, normally what you see in this kind of a thing is like, you know, you have this side that pulls you towards physical education, sports science, that kind of stuff there, which is very common. Well,
no, I got a degree in English with the intention of becoming a journalist.
Wow, that one, no one saw it coming, eh? Journalist, that would be an interesting one.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I was the assistant editor for the university paper as well. and wrote stories, and eventually ended up in Holland.
Oh, interesting. That was what, 22 years ago, 23?
I came here in January of 97.
97.
Yeah, January of
Wow.
1997. It was the last time that the Dutch were all talking about this thing called the Elfstedentocht. I was like, wow, what is this thing? You know, it's this skating in the northern part of the Netherlands and, you know, on frozen canals. And it was like this huge thing. And I had just missed it. And everyone was talking about it. And
that was probably the last one. After that, they
yeah,
never happened again.
it didn't get cold enough. Yeah.
Wow, that would have been amazing.
Maybe the last one ever. You know, we keep going with the global warming and things. Maybe there'll never be another one.
We just need to wait. It's going to come back in a couple of million of years, but that's okay. We're going to be here still. But the point is, so and then what about the language, man? You had to go from English to Dutch, which is
yeah, and a lot of people would say
language.
I'm still struggling with it, but it's okay. So how I got here was I was in my last 6 months of university back there, and I had already done all of my required courses. So I didn't really have like anything that I had to do. So they said, why don't you go to the University of Nijmegen and do your last 6 months, have a nice time, and, you know, that's it. Come back and graduate in, you know, just before the summer in 97. So I said, okay. And I took my bike and with the intention of just finishing up school here, and that would be that. But it didn't work out that way.
Well, and then of course you met somebody, and there we go. As I said, the rest is history. But adapting to the Dutch, I mean, even though Holland is, I think, the only country in the world where you can speak English there, live, work, and do everything in Holland without having to bother learning the language, which is phenomenal. From my point of view.
I mean, the Dutch have obviously invested a lot in educating, you know, Dutch people on how to speak English. It's a tiny country, you know, they have to speak English, they have to speak some German, usually French, maybe. You know, so the Dutch with their languages are super good. You know, wow. Kirsten, my wife, speaks 4 or 5. And, but I was teaching, I graduated and didn't go back to the US. Instead of going back to the US, I worked here in the summer. So we moved to where Kirsten's parents live. It's Zeeuws-Vlaanderen, so it's a province in the Netherlands, not really very populated. And Kirsten thought, because Kirsten's super smart and thinks about everything like way in advance, she's like, it's going to be a lot easier for you to get a job out there than it is back to where we currently live. So I said, okay, let's try it. So we lived at her parents' house, and I rode my bicycle, like, I don't know, I think 12 kilometers, it was like 24, 25 kilometers a day, going back and forth to this place where I was just painting. I did a lot of other jobs. I unloaded ships in the harbor and did some other things, but I got this job at this place where I was basically painting concrete silos. And, you know, I come from New England, so I have this work ethic. I mean, I grew up, my father was a workaholic and, you know, was up at 4 o'clock every morning and worked and, you know, but anyway, so I actually took the job seriously, which these people couldn't believe. They're like, this is summer help kid, like really doing a good job. Yeah. So I spent the whole summer there, and at the end of the summer, they offered me a job.
Wow. So you worked for the whole year, son. Yeah, we only went here for 2 months, and all of a sudden you've done 12 months worth.
So they're like, you can stay. Well, but Kirsten and I had to come back. Kirsten still had a year of school. So I started looking around for a job. Long story short, I got a job here in Nijmegen with a private language institute. And I went in for the job interview. I didn't have a work permit. I didn't have a residency permit. I didn't have anything yet. And I was very honest with them. Also, being in New England, there was sometimes maybe a little bit too honest with people. But anyway, I said, I don't have any of this. And I was surprised because the woman who would eventually become my boss, she said, that's no problem. She said, well, I said, oh, okay. But anyway, what I didn't know was that in Nijmegen, there was a big Philips semiconductor factory at that time. and she had signed a contract with them to provide English language training. But what she didn't have was an American. And Phillips wanted to switch. They didn't want British English, they wanted American English.
Oh, stop discriminating the poor people on the other
Right,
side.
exactly. So I walked in at exactly the right moment.
Wow.
So I got the job, and
Phenomenal.
everything else was arranged eventually. And I worked there for 10 years.
Wow. So then this 10 years take us to 2009 when I met you for the first time.
Yeah.
No, but hold on. Let's go back then, because before that you became an instructor back in 2002, I think, or something like that.
2004.
2004. Okay, so how did you ended up bump into Krav Maga?
I stopped cycling, which was a major, almost a trauma, because it was what I had done for so many years, and a lot of my identity was, like as an athlete anyway, was I was a cyclist. It was very easy. People say, "Oh, what do you do?" I'm a cyclist. I'm a bike racer. And when I stopped, I didn't have that anymore. But I had a body and a brain that was used to, 25 hours a week of training. And you just can't shut that off.
Let me take a second and think about this 25 hours a week of training. Okay.
Yeah.
Phenomenal. Okay, carry on.
Sometimes more.
Jesus Christ.
So you don't just shut that off, And so I was looking for something else. And I spent a few years, I did distance walking. I did like this crazy survival course in the US in 2003, out in the desert for a month with nothing and walking just these crazy distances and no food. And
that for pleasure. Nobody pushed you into that, forced you with a weapon, isn't it? You signed up.
I paid to do it.
I paid to do it. I like to hear those words. Carry on.
Anyway, so, but nothing was giving me, I wanted something that I felt that I could become as attached to as I could cycling. I really felt like I was missing something. But one thing growing up in Maine, like I said, we don't have a lot of people. We don't have a lot of cities. There was no place to learn martial arts. And I really loved, seeing Bruce Lee stuff and karate and all of these things. But as a kid, I could never do any of it. We had a guy who was actually an ex-Army Ranger who lived around in town for a while, and he was teaching some stuff. And that was actually my first sort of introduction to martial arts. We actually had a couple of really good amateur boxers also from our town. And I went and I did a couple of lessons there, but there was nothing like really consistent that I could go to. But then when I moved here and I spent, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years just kind of trying to find something else. So I started with Aikido.
Oh, I would pay for a picture of you wearing a gi and a white belt.
Exactly.
Doing front rolls. Anyone with a picture, I will pay top money, people.
But I really wanted, there are some, but you'll never find them. I really wanted, I was definitely I'll never forget A.L. Yanilov when I eventually started to do the instructor course saying, something brought you here. I don't know what brought you here, but something brought you here. And what brought me was I was looking for something. I didn't find it in Aikido, and I did Aikido like religiously 3-4 times a week, didn't miss trainings. Yes, I did look good in the skirt. Thank you.
That was Manuel. It wasn't me. Okay, so
my legs are shaved too as a bike racer. So
I'm gonna take his keyboard away. Just leave the camera there. Okay, next time.
Yeah.
So, but hold on. You're talking about instructor's course already, but you went straight for the instructor's course, or you had a time when you trained on it?
I started in Aikido, and I did it for, I think, 4 or 5 years. 5 years.
You what? You did 5 years of Aikido? Never told me that.
Yeah.
Jesus, I feel like betrayed now. You're telling me the stuff here in front of everybody. I was the only one who didn't know that. Our marriage is over. I don't want to see you again, huh?
4 or 5 years. I don't remember exactly. But what was happening in the Netherlands was there was only Krav Maga in The Hague, basically, in the West. There was no one over on this side.
Wow.
So I started to try to find out more about Krav Maga. I don't even really remember where I heard those two words for the first time. But I started to look for information about it. And I was home on a visit to the US and I found the book, that, you know, the book by Eyal Yanilov and Emi about self-defense against the armed attack.
Yeah.
And I bought it in Portland, Maine, of all places. I think I even have
Wow.
it here still. Yeah, I definitely
Wow.
have it.
Okay.
Hold on just one sec.
It's probably signed by Emi himself, huh? Okay. What
Well,
is on there?
anyway. No,
Somewhere.
I'm back. Anyway, I have it, but I don't. You know,
Probably,
this book.
someone came in the middle of the night and took the book away because you're not part of the group anymore.
Yeah, they took it back.
Yeah.
But you know, that book that I bought, and that was sort of my first, you know, okay, who are these people? Is Eyal Yanilov, Amnon Darsa is in the book. You know, eventually I would get to know all of these people, have them sleep in my house, you know, and they've all signed the book.
Wow.
You know, so it's quite ironic that I didn't know anything. I didn't know who they were or anything about Krav Maga. But anyway, and long story short, to Mark, I started to speak Dutch there for a second. To make a long story short, Eyal came and they came to the Netherlands and they wanted to have instructors. So I went and spoke with them. I talked to Eyal and eventually I got into the instructor course. I mean, somebody had to begin. Somebody had to start.
Of course.
What could possibly
go wrong? Yeah, and training for a month nonstop. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but given my background as a competitive cyclist, and two, as someone who did Aikido, it did not give me a great start in Krav Maga.
I can imagine.
So what saved me was I just worked my tail off. I really just worked hard. Yeah.
Well, from people that don't know the story from now, let me tell you, in his house has got a bookshelf there where they have little notepads where every single workout from 1975 probably likely has been written down, and he knows everything and he reviews everything, and it's an absolutely painful experience to watch all that. Because I don't even remember what I trained.
For me too.
No, I don't even remember what I trained yesterday. Never mind in 10 years ago. So it's kind of difficult. Anyway, right. So
I did it the hard way. I'm not going to tell everybody, I had 10 years of Krav Maga background. I didn't. I was somebody who wanted to learn Krav Maga mostly for myself. I never had any intention of teaching it. I only started teaching it because I wanted to stay involved in it, and we were threatened that if you just do the course, and you don't start to become an active teacher, well, you won't be able to train with us anymore. So I was scared to death that I would not be able to train with Eyal and Amnon. And so I said, okay, I'll start this, school, and I'll keep that going so I can keep training Krav Maga. But I never wanted to teach it to groups of people. Never had the intention.
Wow. That's an interesting one. How interesting is all this? So they use the usual threatening words. I mean, if you're not with us, you're against us. So therefore,
well, I mean, they said basically, we really want to get this thing going in the Netherlands, and we want people who are going to. We don't want people to just come and do the course. We want people who are going to teach it.
Take it seriously.
Right, take it seriously, which I did. I don't know any other way of doing things if I'm going to do things, and it's for better or for worse.
So that was 2004, and then from there you attended the 21 whatever days, I don't know, back in the day it used to be differently, not in 3 phases, but anyway, so you managed to survive all that, and then eventually open your club and have the wonderful experience of teaching people.
I started with 12 people. Yeah.
Wow, 12 people. That was me after almost a year. Yeah, congratulations. You started,
I had 12 at my first lesson. One of them is still in the club.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's an interesting one. Eh?
Yeah. And I'll never forget the night that I showed up for teaching, and one of the other students came down and said, Heath, man, don't go upstairs. There's 65 people in the room. Like, what? How the hell did they find us?
So
Because I wouldn't
you
answer
promised them
emails,
money.
man.
Yeah. Oh, well.
No, I didn't answer emails. I didn't want people to find us. All I wanted was this little group that I could keep this teaching going, so I could keep going back and learning things from the Israelis.
Oh,
And then
interesting. Only if they knew they would start something like that, huh?
And then somehow people found out,
Well, that's the best thing. As I say, the best ones are the ones who don't want to teach, or don't want to show up, and I just want to do my own thing here. If you want to join us late, it's a different story. Yeah. So someone said, yeah, that question and reserve, and maybe I missed it. Cycling and Aikido, wasn't it? So something else was needed. But why Krav Maga and not something else? No, that's a very good question, because I think there was nothing else there, or perhaps that was the first one you saw it.
No, I think Krav Maga at that time, I think that it fit something that was I don't know, there's sort of missing in me, something that I really wanted to feel more, I don't know, maybe more self-confident, or a lot of my self-confidence was quite damaged with, failing at cycling. It was something that I really loved. I still love, but it was something that I thought, okay, this isn't going to be it. So how do you fill in that hole? But also as a person at that time, and I was the only one from my family that didn't go into the Marines.
Wow. My
father, all of his brothers except for one, the Marine history in the Leavitt family goes all the way back to World War I. We had a KIA on Okinawa in World War II. We had a wounded in action in Korea. My dad was in Vietnam, and I would have been like the perfect age to go to Iraq in '91.
Oh, interesting.
But I went and I rode a bike, and I studied English. So it was kind of, I always felt like I sort of missed something.
Well, the calling was different. The calling was in Europe and in Holland,
yeah,
not
it was
in the
definitely
US,
different.
not in Afghanistan, especially. I mean, Holland is way cooler than Afghanistan for sure.
But definitely fewer landmines.
Yeah, the weather's much nicer. Yeah. But anyway, okay, so that's a very interesting. So then Krav Maga, which at the time used to sound like a Greek yogurt, and Krav Maga, what the hell is this? Some Swedish birth control pill or something like that. Because I remember when people in the beginning used to tell me, what is this?
Whoa, don't start talking about that.
Krav Maga, Krav Maga, Krav Maga, I heard it all.
Krav Viagra, yeah. No, I had a Finnish girlfriend once. Don't start.
No, I like the one that's Kama Sutra. That sounds very nice. Krav Maga, like
No,
so I like it. Yeah. Anyway, so moving on. So then you became an instructor, started working with the guys, and eventually the club all of a sudden went boom, lots of people. And,
right.
And then go back. Let's go forward a little bit. Let's talk about the expert level, because becoming an instructor is one thing, and becoming a black belt in that thing is the top of the hill. Is you winning the Tour de France.
Yeah, you're going to make some sense. Well, it depends on what kind of black belt you want to be, I mean, in nothing, I don't want to take away from anybody else, but I think we sort of saw the last of, if you remember how the camp was in like 2010.
Yeah, we normally joke there's Krav Maga before 2010 and Krav Maga after 2010.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely something to that. Yeah.
What people need to understand is this. One of the things that I miss the most is not the organizations, not nothing. What I miss is the fact that I used to go to Israel, 60, 70, 80 people, full of energy and full of testosterone. And let me show how good I am, but in front of everybody. So go there, son, and please don't disappoint, because otherwise you're going to be a laugh everywhere on the planet. You know what I mean? When you go back home and put in your website that you're an expert level, we can sign at the bottom that says, yes, you are, because we were there. We saw your training. We saw your grading. You did a fantastic job. That's the part that I miss the most, because then after that, people become experts and black belts over the weekend, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, there's the tooth fairy or the Krav fairy, put a little badge underneath the pillow, and the guys are experts. But that's the way what happened in 2010. Yes, that's more or less what happened to us. The subdivision, the fact that people start to, making this business into, I don't know, let me put it this way, money before, let me be very careful with that, because I'm famous for opening my mouth and destroying everything. People focus too
You
much
do?
on the money. Yeah, focus too much on the money, not so much on the reputation, the name, trying to develop this thing and make it grow in a way that is sustainable. It's pretty much like, give me €2,500, you become an instructor, off you go, that's your problem now. And unfortunately, that system is not working as as well as they wanted to. I had a conversation the other day with Alan Predolin in the US, if you had the chance to watch that,
Yeah.
and he nailed this thing in the head completely. It was like, the system was good. Living in Israel, having a package where I teach you X, Y, and Z techniques, you become an instructor in this many hours, and then after that is your problem. You have to go and after marketing, you go after customer service. About everything else is your problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
So that worked for a while, but then people like yourself, that took this thing to another level, opened a business, had a plan to run this, and eventually have black belts and a team of instructors working. Every now and then we'll have people coming from Israel to teach us, and all of a sudden I realize this guy doesn't know anything. Come on, who gave you this black belt? And then we realized that the person basically was an employee of this company, which was getting paid to do a job, and that was pretty much it. So some of the guys we respected, we still have contact to this day, and some others we don't even want to see painted in gold, as you would imagine, which ended up damaging the business more than anything else, because you will work for 6 months very hard teaching people certain techniques, and those guys will show up out of the blue, which basically never had a club in Israel, and all of a sudden tell you, no, those techniques are wrong in front of everybody, of course, because the customer service sucked, and you will be looking like a DICK, to be nice, and all of a sudden you have an issue. It would take another 6 months to rebuild your reputation in front of your students again. But anyway, that's my 2 cents of complaining. Now back to you again.
I'm very thankful to Eyal Yanilov, because, how it ended is it's too bad, but, Eyal was still, when I met him in 2004, Eyal held my hand through the instructor course, and I needed it. I didn't have, maybe I wasn't where I needed to be as far as, some of the things that I was trying to do. And I learned it eventually. I learned it the hard way, but Eyal could have just said, replace this guy or whatever, but Eyal didn't. So I utmost respect. And Amnon, Amnon Darsa helped me a lot as well. It still does, So I'm just thankful.
No, again, I'm talking about this. People are probably tired and sick of hearing this, but I divide this in 3 levels: the student level, the instructor level, and the business owner level. So we've been operating with those guys on the business owner level, where it's not just it's me passing or not, it's my club, my instructor team, my students, and so on. So everything these people will do on top will reflect right at the bottom. So you need to be very careful with that. So that's where we had a lot of issues there, because if you're supposed to be just an instructor, just a black belt on my own, I wouldn't care about those guys much, and I would still be probably part of the group there. But as you said, and you do it, when you go 100%. There's no way of, let's do 50-50, and I don't care. Of course you do care, because we are very passionate about it. And anyway, so that's the way it goes. Huh?
And if you do, if you want to get to that level, I think, I know what you did. I mean, you showed up there 2002 by yourself. You did a month by yourself with Amnon. You punched him in the face the first day.
You need to tell everybody that it was a mistake, But anyway.
You survived a couple of bombings while you were there. You're a legend.
Oh, come on. No. I thought it was all part of the package. Come to Israel. We're going to bombard.
We haven't told anybody about our love affair yet.
Yeah. That's another story. Yeah, but we have to have a bottle of wine and another 3 hours to talk about that. But let's leave it.
All right.
Okay. So then 2010 was it? You became an expert.
Yes, 2010.
Okay. So that expert level change anything? Because I see people changing when they become sometimes a black belt in martial arts. They have 2 ways they go. One, they become very nice, very helpful, very grateful. On the other ones, they become an absolutely asshole and nobody wants to talk to them again. So that's
You'd have to ask the rest.
No. I know exactly which way you went. You went to the left side here. But and how did you feel? Did I make any difference?
It was not a normal expert exam, for one. You know that too.
Yeah, I know.
There
I was taking pictures. Yeah, I know. I remember.
Yeah, there was a lot going on that day. No, I mean, yeah. I mean,
Sorry,
it was
okay.
pretty, the writing was on the wall pretty much already then about how my future was going to be in the Netherlands anyway with Krav Maga, after what I went through to
Yeah,
get
one
to,
of the things that people don't know is that there's a lot of politics, a lot of insecure people in charge of things they shouldn't be in charge, and then eventually, instead of helping others to progress, they tend to hold you back, and
right.
that's
So
pretty much it.
I was told that I was not testing after training for a week and, you know, sweat, blood, and tears, and told that I would not be testing. And okay, and then I was asked, why aren't you testing by AL? And and I was eventually sent out of the gym and was told that there was a taxi waiting for me to take me back to my hotel, and then that there would be no test for me. And had it not been for certain people like Joe Ambrosino and Amnon Darsa, who convinced them otherwise,
Oh
I would
boy.
never have gotten a chance that day.
Well, yeah, that was the funniest thing. I mean, we could run a Netflix documentary about that exam alone.
Yeah,
Just that
that
hour,
was
two
bad.
hours of that. But that's fine. So, but
That was
anyway,
bad.
becoming a black belt, very good. You came home and life carried on as usual. So, in terms of the business, I mean, let's talk about people now. You dealing with people is amazing. It's very rewarding from one side, but at the same time, it's very tiring because people tend to change their minds every 2 minutes. So the guy joined you today, wants to be a black belt in 3 weeks, and then you tell him that it might take a longer. You might, have
Yeah,
a few bumps along the way, a few bruises and stuff like that. Eventually, the guy will
definitely.
leave you after 2 weeks, and then a month later, you find out that he's opening a club next door because he approached another Krav Maga organization, did an online instructor's course, and now he's partner.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, I've been, given our history in Nijmegen with it, we've been with three large organizations, and now we function independently of any organization other than ourselves. Um, it's happened to me a couple of times, but it's happened to me, I think, less than with other instructors. I've been lucky that people haven't, done too much of that to me. There have been a few, and especially one or two of them really hurt because of the amount of time that you invested in them, and that they've gone on and done their own thing, or but whatever.
Yeah, well, again, it's a very difficult thing. I mean, one of the things I've learned the other day in Israel, the last time I was there, is Ron Elliman said, that we are the chefs. We prepare the menu. We have a menu, and then we need to sort of work our way around to make the customers happy with whatever we've got there. Not everybody wants to be Heath Leavitt and become an expert and open a club and live from Krav Maga for how many years now? Too many.
We have been
16, 20, 17
I've
years or
been doing
something.
it for 16 years, and we've been living completely off of Krav Maga now for maybe
Long time.
six, I think.
Yeah, because I
Yeah,
remember the going, dropping the day job and becoming a Krav Maga full time and opening a place was a big decision. It was interesting to find out that because
yeah,
anyone who had to go through this passed to that point where the day job is not doing it anymore. I'm focusing more on the teaching. And the day job is sort of holding me back. So should I let it
yeah.
go? But then the day job pays the bills. The other one is like a jump in the dark.
It's a
Which
big
way would
risk.
I go?
Yeah, and
And I
I'm
remember,
lucky. I'm blessed with a club that I have the people that I have. I have a core group of people that are amazing. We have every walk, every walk of life represented. We have our doctors. We have students. We have everything. But the club, for whatever reason, has a quite a strong core that keeps it, even during the corona and things, and now the fact that I've got, another broken bone that has to have a little bit of time to heal, then,
yeah,
the
it
club
happens. It
will,
happens.
yeah, this is the second time I've had a completely broken foot, and, I
But
had the ACL tear,
if
and
you
that
had to
had to be
consider the
repaired.
number of hours you exercise, those two bonds are nothing compared, isn't it? Because
It's a small price to pay, and eventually, you're gonna pay
yeah,
with some blood and some broken bones, and
well,
so I
okay,
don't
at
think
least
I don't think my students know it yet that I have
it's
a
not
broken
it's
foot.
not bad. It's not worse than you going down the street on a bicycle at 70 miles an hour and hit the car head on. So that would be way more
No,
painful.
no, no, not like
Anyway,
Pantani.
Pantania. But anyway, so okay, so the fact that you have a bunch of people that are supporting, because what I've heard from people that I've been teaching here, because I'm also doing the online thing, is yeah.
Yeah, there you go, guys.
And my first question when I saw that is that it comes with a SPD pedal underneath, so you can ride your bicycle, click on a pedal and carry on from there. And it said no.
Well,
it was a shame.
the first time I broke my foot, I actually did. I rode with the cast.
If I didn't know you, see, I would be surprised there.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, so people don't know about the injury. You're going to tell them later. He's okay.
Yeah.
He's going to survive that. He should be back in about 2 weeks, most likely.
1 week, the cast is coming off, I told them.
Yeah, I know. So what is the future now? Because we're talking about, social distancing and all this jazz, even though here in the UK, this weekend, everybody's out on the street and dancing and, parks are full of people. The seaside is full of people. Nobody seems to care much about this.
It's easy to forget, I think, like this, but the fact of the matter is that it's not over yet, and it's been really a good test for everybody. If you either adapt or you aren't going to be around when this is over.
Mm-hmm.
So the Zoom sessions, and we've been training outside now for a couple of weeks, and with the distancing, and hopefully within just a short amount of time, we'll be able to have some contact, and maybe just outside still, but.
With all my science background and knowledge, that is non-existent, by the way, I will predict that this thing is going to go away the same way it came. One day we're going to be sitting here remembering, remember those 6 months we sat at home? It's been a long time ago. Yeah, so that's more or less what's going to happen.
We'll see.
No, it will. So, and regarding future, what's the calendar? I mean, my calendar, every day I go there and I cross another day. So forget about those events. When we run businesses, we need to be like, 2 years ahead, at least 1 year ahead. So I had a beautiful calendar for 2020, and now I'm going to chuck half of it in the bin and, trying to focus on the 6 months left and maybe next year. So have you guys already start thinking about anything for next year? Or?
Well, I think, first priority is going to be we've been very lucky. You hear schools, the average that I've been hearing from talking to different people is, losing 50% of their students.
Yeah.
We are about at 10%.
Wow. Just very good, by the way, because it's unheard of.
Yeah. So we've been lucky.
As you know me, I keep in contact with the guys in the US, the guys in all over Brazil and other places there. And that was exactly the first thing. The first month, they lost half of the students, and then eventually, 10%. Now, some of them are not even teaching because they realize there's no point to teach. Once we, get back to normal, people will join us again. So,
yeah.
I mean, you have a venue, you've signed a lease or whatever that is for a training place, which is also, that is a problem for some of the guys here in the UK where they still have to pay the monthly rent, but they don't have students. So therefore, it's a very complicated thing. Like having a house, but you cannot live in a house, we have to pay the rent.
Yeah, exactly.
Some others are still teaching on live, doing online classes. And some of them actually managed to sign like 35 plus students in a month with the online training, which I was like, wow, never heard about this thing. It's again, writing the book about the online training in pandemic crisis times, if you like it. So, and some others are just waiting to see what happens. Our issue here is to find out if the venues that we hire towards the end of it will survive the shock, the economic shock and all this. And if they open, we can actually use the place again. And what will be the restrictions? I mean, having 10 people in a class and have to keep them arm's length away from one another, it's not going to do the business, is it? If it was CrossFit, maybe yes, but not Krav Maga. We have to kick people in the groin. I have to have big shoes like this to be able to kick people in the groin from now on.
You have some of those anyway.
I do, yeah, my clown
shoes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's see what happens. And
we need to recover from it and then take it from there.
Yeah. And what is the plan to go to Israel soon?
I want to go to Israel as soon as I can. Again, I love going to Israel sometimes.
I'm glad we are recording this.
Except when I get roped into doing courses at different places with Joe.
Well, it's all about the experience, my friend. It's all about the experience, as I said.
And I have to sleep with Joe in the same bed in a bomb shelter in a bad neighborhood of.
Yeah, I know. that's exactly what happened. Guys, I booked the stuff on Airbnb. It was supposed to 2 single beds, okay? We show up, there was this one double bed, which was very bad anyway, but that's okay.
Double? I would classify it as like 1.5.
Yeah, they snore terribly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Boss.
he knows the
Boss.
story. Yeah, he
Nice,
knows the
boss.
story. Okay, wow. And anyone, any questions regarding anything you've heard here? I mean, people were excited with the idea that you could be a BBC reporter for the Dutch version side of it, but you decided to give up this wonderful career to be a Krav Maga instructor.
Yeah.
Anyone, any questions, anything
See,
specific?
I told you, Joe. Nobody wants to know anything.
Of course they want to know.
Hey. Hello.
Hi, Heath.
Hello, dear.
I don't
How
think
are
I've
you?
seen you since Czech Republic.
Yeah,
How you
been
doing?
a while. How are you? I'm good.
Yeah, long time, long time.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to ask you a question. What advice could you give to women for conditioning themselves, especially if they're only able to take maybe 1 or 2 classes of Krav Maga a week? What other ways can women look at conditioning themselves outside of diets and gym work? But I mean, like myself, I've got my boxing bag here that I'm able to use.
Which is great.
Every day I try to do it. But if you don't have that kind of equipment, what other advice could you give for really conditioning yourself and getting yourself used to the punches and the kicks from the guys and mentally preparing yourself? Because I know you guys over there are pretty hard nuts. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're alone, it's, you know, if like you've got your boxing punching bag, I would recommend also a double end bag for training. I don't know if you know what those are. If you can get one of those are great. You know, I myself and some of the, you know, people that train with us, people are, you know, do kettlebells. Kettlebell is easy, something that you can do. Battle ropes are great for conditioning your, have you ever done battle ropes?
Yeah, the ones that
you know, the ropes that you slam, super.
Yeah. Okay.
Super for conditioning the arms but you know, the best thing to do is to mimic, you know, fighting, which the punching bag is one of the best things to do. But I myself, I use battle ropes quite a bit. I use kettlebells still. I do a lot of punching bag work. I know that some of our women as well. Frederic is here too. Frederic does does punching bag work. Frederic also just does a lot of sparring with the men, you know.
Yeah.
And like a lot of up and down work.
Heath, I know sometimes a lot of the women are a little bit intimidated and are a bit scared to work out with the men. So it's trying to recondition their mind that 90% of the chance you might be attacked by a man. So to get used to those punches and kicks, I think, yeah, it's very important for women to really condition themselves against a man attack.
Yeah, and maybe not even so much physically being, you know, getting used to it, like the punches or the hits, but just mentally being able to, you know, spar with men and get used to the idea even of just getting hit or whatever. I mean, you don't have to go crazy, but, you know, or crazier.
Cool. And hopefully you guys are gonna come over to London. We haven't seen you in ages. So
I know.
We need to test them. We need to test them first.
Joe doesn't invite me anymore. Joe doesn't let me in anymore.
We need to test them first. No, we cannot take anybody. We live in a little island. You remember that?
Yeah.
Thank
That's
you.
worked out well for you guys. See you. Take care.
Well, okay. The man does yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, for people who don't know the gentleman we are talking about here, his training routine is not for everybody, okay? Because we wouldn't survive a few weeks training the way he trains. If we divide his training routine in 3, then maybe you could do that a week. Yeah, it's a very intensive, very demanding, but it's, again, very good. Huh? So anything regarding Israel, we discussed it. I mean, I've been trying to talk to different people. They organize different events. Some of them will be going back and doing the hire an Israeli sort of approach. Instead of being under anybody from there, they will approach the guys and say, right, I will run here. I'll pay for the expenses to hire the front beach and you come and do the teaching. I'll pay you a little bit of money, and off we go. So do you see yourself doing something like that?
I think I know where I'll be going the next time. Yeah,
Right.
I think I'll be. Yeah,
Because
I think.
I've talked to Shahal the other day, and I was like, what would it take to get you teaching us? Oh no, I don't want to work with the civilian world. I was like, okay, Shahal, never mind. But no in Hebrew means maybe, and maybe means yes. So we know that already. So it's a matter of us knocking his door there. And I even volunteered to work on a kibbutz a little bit for free, you know, to get him to change his mind. So I guess our next trip to Israel, you know exactly where you're going to be working for a few days there. Okay, so
Yeah. Okay.
pack your gear. We're going to go to Israel soon. Okay, guys, any more questions regarding anything specific or anything you would like to know from the gentleman there? Because otherwise, I try to keep those interviews about an hour, because otherwise it becomes too long and people don't want to watch this later. And yes, it's been almost an hour. Amazing, isn't it? And you're talking about some interesting stuff there. Okay.
Sure.
So for people, continue training for the grading. We are doing
Definitely continue training, guys. If there's one thing that you have to keep in mind, and that word is consistency. You know, you just have to keep going, and you will get injured. You will, you know, lose motivation at times, but you know, you have to see it as a marathon and not as a sprint.
Yeah, one of the things that I realized, I mean, many years training, is that people see the gym, this community that you're a part of, was sometimes, you know, looking for the fitness side of it. Some others more the social side of it. Some others want to go there and kill everybody because they're psychopaths. But you know, it's depends what you want. You take out of you know from this group of people. But in this time, for instance, what we're seeing is a lot of people holding to the Krav Maga training as part to keep themselves mentally healthy and focused and strong towards that. Because I keep telling everyone, even if we have to fight for food, which I used to joke in my class all the time, keep training hard, because if you need to fight for food one day, you're not going to go home hungry. I mean, I should have kept my mouth shut because it's almost happening there in a way. But for sure, you being fit, being healthy, if you have to go back and invent yourself, finding another job and doing something completely different, at least it will be much easier because you're fitly fit to do that. And the mindset is, prepared also in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, if Krav Maga is your thing, you know, you've got a project for the rest of the time that you're, you know, healthy enough to do it, you know. It's something that I love people who say, oh, I want a starting point and an ending point. I want to be, you know, good at it. And when I get to expert, okay, I'm done. Like, you're not done. You've just started. You know?
You just passed the driving test, and now you got your license, you can start driving.
Exactly.
Yeah, right. That's more or less the idea. Yeah, but as I said, people come to train with you for many different reasons. And it takes a while to find out why people do that. Some will stay for longer, some will stay for, I don't know, a week, 2 weeks, but perhaps what they saw was enough.
Some will stay 16 years, yeah.
And some will stay 16 years, as long as you don't put a chain around their necks and, keep them in the basement. But
what? That's illegal?
Yeah, apparently the war is over. I tell you, the war is over. Anyway, guys, thank you very much, Heath. Thanks for the time, everybody watching.
My pleasure. Thanks for everybody.
We are going to put this later, do a bit of editing and put it on our channel. We have about 10 followers there, huge success. So if you want to watch again, we have some other interviews there from Danny Netzer from the IDF, Shahal Klafeld, Guy Moore, Avi Moria, clinical psychologist from the US, which is also a captain in the American US Army now, but don't tell anybody, secret, okay? And so there's some different points of view. That's the idea, is to be able to bring everything back to Krav Maga and experience that be more interesting. Yep. But, thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for helping. I'll see you guys the next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Take care, Heath. Thanks.
See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hopefully see everybody soon. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Cheers. Bye-bye.